Okay, so we are on the air, or I am on the air as such today. I'm today going to be doing a political test um, on a website called Eight Values. Originally tonight, I had a debate planned with someone. Sadly, they had to plan, and instead, I'm going to be just doing a test. Not one I've done before, not actually seen it properly before, but challenge my mind. It will be something to engage with, and hopefully provide me with some interesting questions. So the test is called Eight Values. I'm sure some people have done this before, um, but I've not. So I'm going to be doing it now. Um, what is Eight Values? Eight Values is, in essence, a political quiz that attempts to assign percentages for eight different political values. You will be presented a right statement, and then you will answer with your opinion on the statement, from strongly agree to strongly disagree, with each answer slightly affecting your scores. At the end of the quiz, your answers will be compared to the maximum possible for each value, thus giving you a percentage. Answer honestly. So yeah, basic enough. Um, I'll take the test, and we'll see where things go. Um, like I said, impromptu, so I apologize if it's not the most entertaining to watch, but hey, um, it's what it is. So click here to start. You will be presented with a series of statements. For each one, click the button with your opinion on it. Got it. Question one of 70 questions. Gosh. All right. Oppression by corporations is more of a concern than oppression by governments. Um, well, straight off the bat, um, I think the important thing to consider with this sort of thing is that the world is not a binary between corporations and governments. Too many people fall into the trap of thinking that we've got a choice between private industry and the state industry, and that isn't the case. The state is not the other end of the spectrum with corporations. We, as in my position of being on the far left, we oppose the idea of this order and hierarchy, this organization essentially organizing things for us from the position of the state. Um, so to pose the question as, oh, it's corporations or governments is a little bit misleading, I think. However, in the world we live in now, in the society we have now, corporations are a bigger concern than governments. Corporations are the people, the capitalists that have the control through their capital, through their wealth. It's it's the capitalist system that ultimately determines the state of the world. It's the transfer and flow of capital, and ultimately, the inevitable economic decay that comes through this system, of potential infinite growth, which causes the misery for those in the bottom. It's corporations commodifying the labor of workers for their own profits. It's corporations ruining the environment to cut corners and make more money. Ultimately, corporations are the people with the power, the capitalist class, the wealthy, and governments play as their fiddle. In fact, governments essentially are their creation in many ways. You look at the states, the nation state as a concept, and many of them are formed by a ruling class seeking to consolidate their power to grant an air of legitimacy. And yeah, to say the government is exactly the same as it was centuries ago would be inaccurate. But ultimately, they still do serve those purposes. You still have those hierarchies, certainly in the UK and definitely in the USA. So yeah, I would say strongly agree. Corporations ultimately are a bigger issue than government. Um, and whilst government is obviously not ideal either, it's ultimately stemming from the capitalist problem um, caused by the capitalist, and ultimately this is where corporations lie at fault, because corporations are the what capitalists use as their bodies, their vehicles for economic might. So strongly agree. Question two. It is necessary for the government to intervene in the economy to protect consumers. Now, again, this question implies, the government is the opposing end to, the free market. Um, However, I do think we should frame this within the context of today's society, where sadly we do have states and we do have governments. Um, and if you have a market, you want to make sure that market has regulations and rules. And obviously, it's not going to be something that's a long-term solution, because in a free market, profit is ultimately the end goal. The capitalist with the most profit and the most capital is the best capitalist. So ultimately, regulations will be binned off in time. However, you still need those regulations. If you don't have people maintaining the sense of justice and reason above the sheer goal of profit, then you're going to see, for instance, oil companies ravaging oceans and bays to dump their, waste. You're going to see products with awful shelf life and terrible environmental detractions being allowed to be sold. And ultimately, you need to make sure that isn't happening. So yeah, having a regulatory body to prevent the unfiltered market being spiraling out of control is very important. Now, obviously, if you scrapped the entire market itself, the capitalist mode of distribution and of markets and stuff, you would avoid this problem. You wouldn't need to have people intervening, because the idea of cutting corners and gutting, say, the environment or workers' rights to make a greater profit wouldn't be something that's thought of, because it's not going to be taking place. Because why would you? How are you going to profit off stuff when society is worker controlled? No, you can't extract profit from someone, because you couldn't take someone's labor and use it for yourself, in the way of benefiting yourself at the expense of others. That's not going to happen. So there obviously wouldn't be the ability to profit off stuff. But this question, certainly in today's society, it's something you have to strongly agree with. You can't be faced with a situation where massive, TNCs can just do as they please without any intervention. But sadly, it's a world we're heading more and more towards, as far right governments, like in the US, seek to deregulate the economy, and subsequently place capitalists above workers. So yeah, strongly agree. The free of the markets, the free of the people. Yeah, just straight up the bat. This is one that easily you disagree with. People like to use this as a misleading sort of, free markets mean free people. And yeah, if you spend like 5 seconds thinking about it, then yeah, fine. It's like, oh, freedom for all. But the more you think about it, this freedom is not of one, for people. It's for the freedom to pursue capital, to accrue profits and capital, to be as free a capitalist as you can. It's about how they make the money, which is free. So, for instance, a employer doesn't have to worry about the regulations, the health and safety checks, the ethical standards of their practice. They are free to commodify the world how they wish, and thus they can dump their waste in an unethical way. They can use cheap and unsafe products in their materials in their products. They can pay their workers next to nothing and give them shoddy working conditions, because they've got a free opportunity to profit how they like. The market does not care about ethics and about consumer trust. It cares about making money. And subsequently, a free market is fundamentally anti-human in this sense, because it does not care for the people that live in the world that products exist on. It only cares for the system that is in place, making profits and stuff. So subsequently, this is a total sham. I just realised actually that I forgot to check the chat and make sure it's all okay. Brilliant. It is all working. So yeah, we'll go back to this now. It is better to maintain a balanced budget than to ensure welfare for all citizens. Yeah, it's another question which relies upon the supposed binary between government and corporation. And ultimately, that sort of makes this question a little bit misleading again. However, just looking at this, it should be evident that the welfare of people living in the country, in the society, comes before anything else. If people are dying in your country, then you failed as a leader of that country. And if you've got resources and wealth, you need to be spending that on making sure your people are fundamentally living decent lives. The idea of a budget being balanced while people are out starving and not able to access healthcare is disgraceful. Yet, sadly, so many people, in politics today, seem to think that's acceptable. And it's a result of capitalism again, where human lives are commodified and seen as a mere profit cutting corner area to maximize the wealth of the ruling class. But sadly, the fact we have to sort of ask this question of, oh, should we cut welfare to maintain a budget, is indicative of the horrors of Western capitalism. However, again, under a fairer, better system than capitalism, you would not even need to worry about the welfare of people, because people's human rights would be maintained from the start. In a socially owned society, the resources we have are going to fundamentally be used to ensure everyone has 3 square meals a day, drinking water, a house, education, healthcare, things which would be easily providable under society today, because we clearly have these resources, but are distributed so poorly, allowed to rot and fester in the control of a handful of people, that we see people starving mere feet away from the supermarket, where food just goes off because no one's able to buy it. It's not needed, in the sense it's not bought, sorry, and it's needless food wasted whilst people are left hungry and homeless. It's disgraceful. So no, a balanced budget that lets people starve because they don't have access to the fundamentals of life is not a budget worth having. And really, we should not be allowing a handful of people to control the wealth of an entire region. So once again, it's a question that's slightly flawed, but you still have to strongly disagree. Humans come before wealth and profit. Publicly funded research is more beneficial to the people than leaving it to the market. Absolutely. I mean, once again, as I'll keep saying, it presents a binary of government and corporation. However, if you have a research goal, it's in the best interest of society to do it objectively and using reason. If you have a profit incentive, the results of this research are going to be used by the corporation to make the most money. So, for instance, if you had a potential benefit of healthcare, if you could make a drug which could save a lot of lives in a previously unknown area, if you have a corporation controlling this, they are going to want to make sure they are making the most money out of it, which is pretty disgraceful. Because imagine a situation where people can't access the drugs they need to survive because the price is too high, or the drug is exclusively controlled by one corporation, so it's only distributed in a certain area. That's the situation happening right now in many countries, certainly in America, where people just die because they can't afford to, let alone pay for the drug. They can't even get to the hospital because the ambulance that would take them there gives them a bill afterwards. They can't afford to have a baby because staying in hospital for a few days to give birth is a massive cost. It's disgraceful. So yeah, you can't have profit as the main goal in research and in education in general, because then you are actively not only allowing for wealthy capitalists to control the goals and ideas behind this research, but allowing them to control the results of it as well, allowing information to be withheld, keeping back progress in the name of private profit. It's disgraceful. Again, a socialist society where this idea of social class and of the capitalist class has been removed would allow for all research to be societally available and owned, and subsequently would not see this issue arise. You're not going to see one corporation holding back progress, because all of a sudden the tools to which they produce that research are societally owned. So no one individual can say, oh, this is my private research, because they use the tools of society. Therefore society reaps the benefits of it, instead of just some profiteering parasite being able to prize the rewards of human endeavor. So yeah, public funded research, definitely, strongly agree. International trade is beneficial. So right off the bat, again, the idea of different nations around the world is a somewhat flawed one. The more you think about it, like dividing ourselves into different neatly drawn out states is a little bit it's outdated. The idea that just a line in the ground determines, oh, you're from this country or that country, it's all right. You think about it for more than a few seconds, and it's one that falls apart. Really, you mean look at Europe, for instance, where you can sort of see the lack of difference between certain parts of Europe, but then suddenly it's like, oh well, there's actually a border here. What's the point? What's the point of dividing yourself into those nationalities when there's so little difference between them? Especially when those borders are used to actively prevent people from attaining their lives, and nations are used to maintain the capital and wealth of ruling people in certain areas. But in terms of trade, I think it's important to be using the goods of the planet for everyone in the planet. Now, this obviously isn't something that is done at the moment, where resources are hoarded by the wealthy, and the Western world is obviously in control of a lot of the planet's goods and wealth and of trade in general. But in a fairer world, we could see the resources distributed fairly, and we could see people, no matter where they were born, having access to the fruits of the planet and being treated fairly, instead of the dismal outcomes we've seen today. So it is beneficial. We shouldn't be closing ourselves off to the rest of the world, but obviously it would need to take place in a non-capitalist society. So agree, because I don't think this question is taking into account the stuff that's coming up. From each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. Absolutely, easily a great quote. Karl Marx at his finest. If you have a need in society, if you need to be accommodated for, you should be. You're a human being. You matter, and there's no reason we should just let you, fester. It's inhumane to suggest otherwise. And yeah, people all have different talents and abilities and things they can offer to society, be they creative, mathematical, physical, writing, all those different things people have to offer, even just through living as a human being. We should not tie our worth to the amount of profit we can produce for a capitalist. We can let a capitalist extract from us, but in our intrinsic selves, we are all inherently valuable simply for existing. And yeah, it's subjective how valuable something is to you individually. However, that does not mean that something is not valuable. Like, for instance, I do not personally like Western films. The people who write them have an audience though, and they do enjoy those type of films. That doesn't, just because I don't enjoy something doesn't mean it's not going to be worthy of a place in society. And we need to move past the idea that our worth is tied to how much profit a capitalist can extract from us, how much we are given back by the profiteering ruling class. So yeah, strongly agree. It would be best if social programs were abolished in favor of private charity. Absolutely not. I mean, it's a disgrace to even consider the idea that we need to have charity to keep people going in society in the first place. It's a society where people are suffering and have to rely on the sort of generosity of others is pretty disgraceful, in my opinion. But whilst we have capitalism, we need to have these social nets to ensure people aren't falling into poverty and falling into further destitution. Now, it's obviously the capitalism itself needs this lower class of people, this working class. not well, not working class, but they need a large body of people have a foot of society to ensure that low-paid jobs are circulated, and obviously maximum profit can be squeezed out of this lower band of people. So obviously that is the problem with this sort of question, especially when you consider that under a societally owned system, you wouldn't need these social programs because there'd be, assured rights of everyone, and these, wealth inequalities and private control of essentials wouldn't be taking place either. So these people would not be barred from essentials of life and just, enjoying their lives by a free market. But the dangers of allowing, human rights, human essentials like water, like food, like housing, to be controlled and owned by private, goodwill, subjective to the whims of a few wealthy individuals, is grotesque. We can already see in America, for instance, LGBTQ homeless people faring much worse than others because these charities are often run by evangelical Christians who do not agree with LGBTQ people and subsequently, turn them away. That's only one example, and there's many more, And is that something we want to be happening? No, not at all. So subsequently, no, we strongly disagree with this. It's a disgrace to even consider it, really. There should not even be the need for charity in today's society. We have the resources for everyone to live a sensible, a comfortable, healthy life. 9, taxes should be increased on the rich to provide for the poor. I mean, the rich should not even exist to begin with. If you look at how the rich become rich, it's through the exploitation of labor, taking what other people work to create, their produce, and turning it into your own private profit, extracting profit from them to create your wealth and handing a morsel of what they produce back. So, for instance, imagine a McDonald's, people on the kitchen making the burgers and the chips, and the people who ship the chips in, or not ship, drive them from the farm to the McDonald's, and people selling it to you at the counter, and the farmers themselves. All those workers produce the wealth of McDonald's, but the wealth itself is going primarily to the boss, to the CEO, the shareholders, people making 6-7 figure salaries off the back of everyone else's labor. Meanwhile, those McDonald's workers are lucky to, get minimum wage, but barely even livable wage. The farmers off in, the third world who are on these farms, they're not seeing anything, barely. They're seeing enough to pay their rent on the farm, which is also owned by the same people who own the McDonald's. The whole system is fundamentally built on this exploitation. So the idea that the rich exist in the first place is fundamentally wrong and flawed. But if they are around, if they are existing at present in society, then yeah, absolutely, taxes should be increased. They should not even have that wealth to begin with. There should not be such a wealth divide, a growing wealth divide in the first place. So yeah, no, I strongly agree. Inheritance is a legitimate form of wealth. Well, really, there is no legitimate form of wealth in the sense that someone just hoarding millions. You can't earn millions yourself. You just can't. You at some point along the way, you've exploited someone else's labor. And yeah, that doesn't mean to say you personally went to like Eritrea or Ethiopia and like beat some miners or something, but you still took part, and in the capitalist system, you profited off other people's labor and reap rewards for yourself. Therefore, your wealth is illegitimate. So, whilst this question is obviously massively wrong, because the ideas of capitalism rewarding hard work sort of fall apart when you consider that someone who's just born into a wealthy family can do nothing and be comfortable and wealthy for their whole life. But even if their ancestors accrued this wealth themselves, it isn't legitimate. No matter how hard they may think they have worked, all along the way they've benefited off other people's labor. Especially when you consider that these people who have this wealth most likely got it from the colonialism and imperialism of the empire age. the slavery that made America rich, the genocide that killed millions of Native Americans to kick them off the land, which American settlers then took for themselves. So strongly disagree. And really, this question ignores the ideas behind wealth divides that we see today. Public utilities like roads and electricity should be publicly owned. Well, everything should be publicly owned, as everyone contributes to society through their labor. Everyone should be able to own it. But certainly things that are clearly interconnected parts of society should be owned by all. So yeah, strongly agree. Excessive government intervention is a threat to the economy. Again, it's an interesting question, because when we look at this, we see the binary between corporations and government. The idea that there's just this, duo, what was I saying? This binary choice between the two, when obviously that isn't the case. Now, the way this question is written, it implies that if you disagree with this, you are pro, a state controlling the economy, and if you agree with this, you're, pro free market corporate. And whilst I would be tempted to disagree, because I think the economy is, you can't leave it to corporate individuals. You got to consider that the state itself is still a function of capitalism. It's still acting in the interest of profit. It's still trying to make a society in which their capital, the upper echelons of society, hold wealth, and subsequently they, in many ways, are a threat to the economy. So I would actually, I'd put disagree to a smallish degree, because whilst the corporate control of society, of the economy, sorry, is obviously terrible, but government, in the sense of asking it here, is also pretty culpable. So I'd disagree with this. Those with a greater ability to pay should receive better healthcare. Well, straight up the back, the idea that a human right should be something behind a paywall is, grotesque and horrific. And the idea that people have a greater ability to pay in the first place is also pretty barbaric. But obviously, in the context of today's society, no, healthcare should be available to all, accessible to all. We have resources. It shouldn't be something that you should be able to deny people based on a free market. So yeah, this is just complete bunk. Strongly disagree. Quality education is a right of all people. Absolutely. You need that assured in society. Another human right, the ability to learn, the ability to attain and gain information without any barrier or paywall in front of it. The situation with schooling in so many parts of the world is disgraceful, where schools do not have the funding and staff to support the kids who, are growing through life in a very formative part of their, experience and years. Meanwhile, all this wealth sits unspent at the top of society. All this wealth is squandered and wasted on the vanity projects of wealthy people who did not even earn their own wealth. It's a disgrace. So yeah, not only is this a right, but it should be an indicting statement on the complete absence of any reason or logic in capitalism that we aren't seeing quality education across the board. Kids go into schools where they haven't updated the textbooks in decades, where information is out just completely wrong because it's literally moved on, where backwards, religious propaganda is taught in schools because the education boards are controlled by profiteering, religious groups and people who don't care but to enforce their own dogma on the children. It's disgraceful. So yeah, this is absolutely a right, and it's a damning statement about our society that some people could disagree with this. The means of production should belong to the workers who use them. Absolutely. We don't even need to ponder on this one. Workers should own the means of production. Workers should own what they produce. Basic statement. The United Nations should be abolished. Mixed one on this. The UN is, quite famously a very pro-Western administration. It's got a veto power for Western nations like the UK, US, France, obviously Russia and China have veto powers too, but it's not to the same degree of influence as compared to the West. But at the same time, it is still streets ahead of the supposed binary opposite as posed by this question, where it's each country can just do what they want. For instance, America pulling out of the UN Bill of Human Rights, that's got pretty dire consequences. So, I would strongly disagree for the context of today, because we need to obviously have a world consensus on stuff. But at the same time, we've got to consider that the UN is not this bastion of peace, but a very flawed institution. However, obviously, this is more to do with the works of society around it rather than the thing itself. The idea of united peoples is good, but the idea of the UN as it exists today is flawed. Having said that, I still strongly disagree. Gosh, there's a lot of questions left. I don't want to be here for too long. Military action by our nation is often necessary to protect it. Now, this is an interesting one because, to some degrees, yeah, we should be thinking about how to protect people. However, in the sense that one state attacking another is protection, that's absolutely wrong. And the actions of the state to attack other places is usually just an excuse to attain more land or more resources, and subsequently further one's capital, as per the system of capitalism. And subsequently, this can't be supported. So I would disagree with this, because ultimately military action is done to further the needs of the state. In fact, strongly disagree, because it's not something which is done to protect people. It's done to protect the capital or further capital of that state, of the ruling class, as we see with the dozens of US interventions across the decades, done to essentially make people wealthier in America. I was going to check the chat again, perhaps read some questions. Yeah, not much for me to respond to here. Nice to see people talking and stuff. Surprised, 8 people, pretty good. Yeah, great, love to see you all. Time to go back to this. I support regional unions such as the European Union. Oof, this is contentious. Once again, the EU is a capitalist institution. It's a trade bloc. It's fundamentally a capitalist organization. Having said that, the opposite as posed by this question implies isolationism, protectionism. The idea that we should be keeping ourselves in quite a nation-centric mindset. And that's not something I agree with. But then I don't agree with the way the EU conducts itself either. And as for regional, I think we should be going a step beyond that. I think we should be global. We should be looking to act as one for the needs of everyone on the planet, not looking to benefit just our own based on geography. So I'd put agree. However, again, it's another poorly phrased question. And really, this quiz has had quite a few of these. It is important to maintain our national sovereignty. Again, I don't think the nation as a concept is 100% logical, really. When you consider just the amount of people it just lumps into what constitutes a nation, the amount that this question goes to imply the sort of closed-mindedness and isolationism of this mindset is quite a poor one. I tend to think that it's a bit silly to have ourselves comprised of like different nations. Like as I said earlier, what difference is there between someone who's a few meters across on a border, or compared to someone who's thousands of miles away but in the same country technically? To use Russia as an example, the people in Volgograd, and actually not Volgograd, it's oh no, my geography is failing me. Is it Kaliningrad? It's a city right on the east end of Russia. Yeah. What do they have in comparison to people in Moscow? Are they the same people just because they're part of the same country? No. Are people in Jackson, Mississippi the same as people in Los Angeles, California? It's silly to just lump people all together as one. And subsequently, this idea of national sovereignty is a bit misleading. It's the way of a state, a capitalist state, saying, "Oh well, we want control. We want our rights to say what goes." And it's not the people saying this; it's the people who are in charge of the state, the wealthy. So subsequently, this question ignores what the nation and the state fundamentally is, and it's the consolidation of power for the wealthy people inside that country, using the country as a front, as a distraction of sorts for the people. Saying, "Oh, you're British. Be proud to be British." What good is our British pride if our people are starving because resources are not being distributed fairly? If people are living in poverty whilst wealth exists in vast quantities at the summit of society, it's absurd to have this like national sovereignty agenda while it's clearly not being met because the nation is being run by a handful of people, and we need to be moving away from this. So I disagree with this. A united world government would be beneficial to mankind. Now I do agree with this, but I would change this from world government to just a united world, because you don't need the system of structuring and order that a government has. You don't need like a prime minister of the world. You don't need that. But a united globe where we don't have these borders, where we don't have divisions based on arbitrary lines and exclusionary cultures and stuff, we don't need that. So yeah, strongly agree. It is more important to retain peaceful relations than to further our strength. Absolutely. The idea that we need to better ourselves to everyone else is ultimately one that just weakens us as people. If we are acting in a way that divides ourselves from each other, that excludes ourselves from other people, we lose so much in enrichment, in happiness, in knowledge, and ultimately worsen our experience on this planet. We've only got one life. We may as well live it in a way that makes people happy and makes ourselves happy. So the idea of being strong is ultimately futile, in the sense of national pride and we're the best people, because what does that produce? Isolated, angry group of people who don't have any relations to anyone else because they're too busy trying to fulfill their own sense of worth by worsening the experience of others. And it's ultimately pretty silly. And who doesn't want peace? Who doesn't want the ability to be able to enjoy our lives without having to worry about death and war and poverty? So yeah, peace should be the striving goal of everyone. War is not good. Hostility is not good. The more we break down these divisions, the better our experience on the planet will be. So yeah, strongly agree. Wars do not need to be justified to other countries. Yeah, pretty easy no for this one. Again, the purpose of a war is never, not really, to protect people or to further the interests of progress and of fairness. It's to benefit the capital of the state, to make people wealthy, essentially. And subsequently, these wars that are killing countless people, that are racking up debts and bodies counts and just environmental damage and all the horrors that you see with global conflict, all they're doing is lining the pockets of defense contractors and of oil mercenaries, not mercenaries, oil conglomerates, and making people wealthy from the deaths of thousands of people. And the idea that, as we often see, a wealthy nation can just do what it likes to accrue this capital is disgusting. And especially when, like I said, it's a wealthy nation like America, like the UK, going to smaller nations and telling them, oh, well, we're going to fight this battle here and we're going to take these resources and we have the just cause to do this. Yet so many people think that we have this right, we have this divine right to just intervene where we see fit. And it is all done in the name of accruing more capital, of gaining more wealth, of being a better capitalist. So yeah, this is a gross idea. So yeah, strongly disagree. Military spending is a waste of money. Yeah, it essentially is, because the idea of protecting the nation, as I said a second ago, is pretty flawed when the people in that nation are suffering without basic human rights and needs. What good is having a strong military to protect you if the people you're protecting are dying without healthcare, without clean drinking water, in an underfunded schooling system? It's hardly as though we don't have those resources, but in fact we waste so much on so much, arms and guns and planes and jets and bombs and boats and all that stuff, when it could be spent on bettering people's lives. But again, the idea of nations fighting each other over, the same worker-produced land is such a waste of money, a waste of time, a waste of life, a waste of life. Imagine how much could have been gained from productivity and brains and lives of all people who are dead from the wars of nations across the generations. We could have seen the Albert Einstein or Mary Curie come out from someone who died in World War II. We could have seen so much ingenuity and brilliance from people who never had the chance to show it. So it's a waste of so much stuff, and it stems from, again, the need to accrue capital, the need of people trying to get wealthier and using military and conflict and warfare to do so, not caring about the lives they destroy. So yeah, absolutely agree. It's a waste of money. International aid is a waste of money. Now, again, similar to charity, international aid should not exist because the discrepancies between wealth across the world, the seizing of wealth by countries at the expense of other countries, should not be happening. Because the imperialism that lets, say, the US decide that African countries are going to privatize their land for American corporations is what causes the poverty and lack of wealth for said African nations, because all the wealth and resources are being controlled and thus heading over to America. You take a corporation like Nike or Adidas, which is able to buy up factories and resources and subsequently pay their workers very little to maximize profits back in America. Look at the British Empire and how wealthy Britain got from seizing the resources of places like India and Nigeria, and the damage is still done because you still have that systemic poverty, you still have those massive class divides, you still have the lack of wealth in those nations, and the UK is what, 5th or 6th wealthiest in the world through that colonialism, through the imperialism, the brutalism that destroyed massive parts of culture and heritage around the world to make the UK money, to make France, Spain, all these European empires a load of money. So the international aid we're paying to them is a fraction of what we owe. We are wealthier than those nations because of the theft of those resources that our ancestors accrued or stole rather. So to say it's a waste of money is a complete lie. It's and that's not what word I'm looking for. It's it's a fraction of what we should be earning. It's like chucking pennies into a fountain when you owe thousands. we need to address the clear discrepancies between the wealth of our nation compared to others. Our nation, my nation, the UK, but then also America, France, all the Western European nations have this wealth because of the colonialism and imperialism that they enacted upon the world. So yeah, I strongly disagree with this because it's just not true. It ignores the theft that our nations have done upon the world. So yeah, strongly disagree. My nation is great. Yeah, you mean you've heard all the stuff I've said before, but the UK especially is a nation which has used slavery, colonialism, imperialism, warfare, death toll in the millions, terrible, terrible history of brutalism, racism, sexism, and no, I wouldn't say it's great at all. But then no nation is really great. No nation can really say it's a force for good when it's a state run by a ruling class upon the workers, taking the wealth of people, the produce of workers, and distributing it in a way that allows wealthy people to be at the summit. To allow capitalists to exploit and commodify the workers to produce their wealth. So no, I would strongly disagree with this. There's no point celebrating nations which just clearly aren't a force for good. So yeah, patriotism is a bad thing. Research should be conducted on an international scale. I feel like I've already answered this question, but we should be definitely using a global outlook to do this sort of thing. There's no point doing research that only benefits one region when it could be better quality research, but also better for people in general if it affects everyone. What's the point of limiting your research by trying to keep it to yourself? It ultimately comes down to the capitalist ideals of trying to better yourself, your own capital. And ironically, it only worsens your state of being because you're actively worsening the quality of what could be groundbreaking research to try and better yourself. Imagine the profiteering corporation trying to keep their medical research to themselves. Then suddenly one of those CEOs gets an illness that they can't cure because they were withholding their information, but then so was every other corporation, and now they don't have a cure which could have been achieved. And Mr. CEO dies of a needless death. So yeah, I strongly agree. We shouldn't really have these. We shouldn't have borders in general, but especially not for research. Governments should be accountable to the international community. Absolutely, they should be accountable to the workers anyway. They shouldn't, be. We shouldn't have this class system to begin with. But whilst we have nations, we need an international sense of justice. And this is hard to achieve because of, like I said, the capital of these things. It's why America has got away with what it has done for generations. Same with the UK. You don't need to be Mensa to know that slavery was wrong, but it was being used and is still being used to make wealth for capitalists today. So the accountability of these governments has to be there. And even in the theoretical, post-government society, post-state society, you still want that accountability. You need to be able to say, yeah, these things that happened in the past were terrible and should be condemned. And we shouldn't be forgetting the history of the planet. So yeah, strongly agree. Even when protesting an authoritarian government, violence is not acceptable. Absolutely rubbish. You need to, or not you, people need to understand that if you have an unjust, unfair system or atrocity going on, you need force to stop it. You can't convince people to just stop being oppressive. If they had a moral conscience, they would have stopped already. And even if you are somehow the great persuader that can convince anyone to stop doing something just through the goodness of their heart, that's one person compared to the plenty of other people who are doing that. Your words that you are trying to get people to stop with do not stop the gun being forced in the marginalized person's face. Like you don't beat oppressive regime just with words. And yeah, it'd be lovely if we could just talk a way out of fascism, but that's not going to happen. You need more. You can't stop a hand coming to smother your face with just, oh, please don't do that. You've got to actually block it, and you've got to root out the cause. And violence as a form of defense, which ultimately is, anti-fascism is the defense to fascism, that's absolutely justified. If you're a marginalized person, if you're a person under threat from the far right, if you're a person who has the sense of morality to see, oh, the far right are a problem, are a threat, you absolutely have justification in using violence against them as a countermeasure. And yeah, it's not like we're saying, oh, well, if you're violent, it will just go away. Obviously not. Fascism doesn't just go away because you punch a fascist once. But as a countermeasure, as a direct, oh, if you mess with us, you will be, attacked. If you flaunt your Nazism in our face, we will, get you for it. That's an effective countermeasure. That's something which needs to be done. And it's something that people need to realize is necessary whilst we are, dealing with a far right ascendancy. But if it's at a point where an authoritarian government has been installed, then yeah, the workers absolutely have the, right and need to bear arms and fight the oppression. So strongly disagree with this. My religious values should be spread as much as possible. I am an atheist, so I do not have religious values, but this is just not the case. We shouldn't be having this hierarchical order to society based on not anything substantive. We shouldn't be tearing ourselves off to, oh, this is the right way, this is what I say, and this goes. So yeah, disagree. Our nation's values should be spread as much as possible. Again, no. The nation is not a valid actor. The state is not a valid actor. What is a state but a tool of the capitalist to protect their private property, to give themselves legitimacy when they have none? And especially my nation, the UK, for us, we may well lead many categories or be at the top end of many of the social progress axes, but look at what it's come through. Look at how we've attained our wealth. Look at what our government is doing right now, and look at why we are at the top of those lists. Because our society has not had the position of oppression placed upon it. We've never been a nation that has been oppressed by the rest of the world. Certainly, not in the certainly not since it's been called the United Kingdom. So no. It is very important to maintain law and order. Again, strongly disagree. Order is not something which needs to be had. Certainly not in the sense of societally hierarchical stuff. You don't need people telling everyone else what to do. That's not fair. There's no justification for that. And laws are not the same thing as morals, as ethics. You can have a moral and ethical society without having a law, a sense of force behind it. You don't need to look very hard to see laws that are clearly not just, like people being incarcerated for recreational drug use, like people being denied equal treatment, based on their ethnicity or the sexual identity you have. It's not on to be doing that. So no, this is not very important. So I disagree. The general populace makes poor decisions. Pretty open question. Well, you could argue yes and no, really. I find it's a little bit vague to sort of say stuff like that. Obviously, people do, they do make poor decisions, but at the same time, they also, they do know stuff. I'm going to put neutral / unsure because I think it's a bit vague to sort of give an answer for that sort of question. Victimless crimes, such as drug use, should not be crimes at all. Absolutely, and there also shouldn't be a state to tell you what is and isn't a crime. As I said a second ago, gay marriage was a crime. Two people of the same gender getting married or having a relationship was criminal. Black people trying to vote was a crime, was voter fraud. All these things which the state has decided is against the law are not unjust. And yeah, you need to be viewing things beyond just what the state says. Similarly, the idea of paying your employees less than their labour's worth is not seen as a crime, yet it is unjust. The state actively, relies upon the exploitation of workers in this way to accumulate capital for the wealthy. Yet we don't see this as a crime because of the way capitalism and the state conditions us. So yeah, strongly agree. The sacrifice of some civil liberties is necessary to protect us from acts of terrorism, a classic fascist trick to trick and con people into giving up their autonomy and freedom as a human being to protect them from an unnamed threat. You're seeing Trump doing this a lot with the increase in surveillance and the increase in deregulation and all these things, and the crackdown on immigrants and stuff, all to protect them from the terrorists and stuff. And it's ultimately it's a fascist technique to distract people with unknown threats, to take away their liberties, to exert more control, to make the extraction of profit easier. So yeah, this is another pretty straightforward question. We are now halfway through. I'm going to check the chat again. Before it's getting a bit dry, I didn't get a drink of water this time, sadly. So I'll check this now. Lots of people here. Lovely people here. The feminine degenerate, cultural boomerist, Ben my dick, cucumber snatch. What name? Some random geek. Loads of people here. Juliet Fisher. Yeah, no, great company. Glad everyone is enjoying the stream. I mean, I'm assuming you are. You probably wouldn't be here if you weren't. Anyhow, government surveillance is necessary in the modern world. No, just quite simply no. What authority, what legitimacy does a group of people, the state, have to treat its citizens as mere puppets for itself, mere toys, mere cogs in its system? What purpose does it have doing this? And ultimately, it's again to further its capital, to ensure that potential threats are, to that state's authority, are being rooted out. Which is why America, for instance, does so much to prevent far left groups from organizing. Which is why, obviously, far left groups often hide their identities, because it turns out that lots of people want them in prison for it. So yeah, another strongly disagree. The very existence of the state is a threat to our liberty. Absolutely. Yeah. An unjust authority, a group of wealthy people who have created a state to, protect their private property, to ensure their position at the top of the social order is maintained, is not liberty. That's not freedom. Regardless of political opinions, it is important to the side of your country. I mean, I think this question is pretty much answers itself, really. Like, regardless of reason, you should just agree with a country. No, that's terrible. Even if you don't apply any sort of any of your own views to it, you shouldn't just go along with something just because it's your thing. It's not. I'm British. I don't agree with every single thing that Britain has as a law. It would be silly to do so. Imagine if Britain one day said, "Oh, if your favorite color is green, you go into prison." It's like, that would be absurd. But I would just suddenly go along with that because it's on the country. It's like, no, you don't just think X just because this country also thinks X. No authority should be left unquestioned. Did I answer that correctly? I hope so. No authority should be left unquestioned. Absolutely. Every hierarchy, every authority, every system of order needs to be scrutinized. We need to ask ourselves, why is this person at the top? And if there's a just reason for it, then yeah, that's all right. If it's like someone teaching you something about another language or something, or about maths, then yeah, that sort of authority is all right, because it's someone helping you learn. It's someone giving you a position that you can't have yourself because you wouldn't have known that knowledge, maybe, and then helping you. A teacher teaching you something about a science is obviously going to be someone who has that authority over you, to help you learn that. But a state telling a group of people what to do, a police officer being able to dictate and brutalize citizens based on their position as an officer. No, that's not just. That's not moral, and that should be questioned and ultimately overturned. So yeah, people need to realize that just because someone is in charge does not mean they should be. Just because people are wealthy does not mean they should be. Just because immigrants who cross the border can be illegal sometimes doesn't mean they should be. And if you're willing to just go along with what an authority says to you, you are little more than a bootlicker, someone who just toes the line and does what someone tells them to simply because they told you they were the boss. And that's not good. A hierarchical state is best. Yeah, again, answers itself. It is important that the government follows majority opinion, even if it is wrong. Tricky one. Well, actually, no, it's not a tricky one. It has to be agreed. You've got to go along with democracy. However, it is worth saying that if you imagine a country like America, where people often, vote against the rights of people, for instance, recently I can't remember where it was, but trans people were voted against using the bathroom that corresponds to their gender, and that's disgusting. Trans people should be absolutely able to use the bathroom of their choice, of that matches with their gender. Like a trans woman uses the ladies' room, trans men use the men's room. Simple as that. It's none of your business what someone else's gender is. It's their gender. They are that gender. But you wouldn't. I think it's disgusting that it could be taken away based on what the majority opinion is. Having said that, we should also be considering that if people vote for something, that's the will of the people. Obviously, this sort of thing would be a little bit easier in a society without so much misinformation, where people could access the facts and the truth. People could make decisions without biased media trying to sway them and not giving them the right situations and stuff. And in a fair society, someone saying, "Oh, here's my incredibly transphobic opinion," wouldn't be backed by the majority. People would say, "Oh, well, no, this is just bigoted trash. We're not voting for this." So, in theory, on paper, once we move past sort of the problems in society today, yeah, this is absolutely true. But for right now, whilst you have a rising fascist movement, it's not 100%, reliable. I think again, it's a vague question, so I'll put agree for it. The stronger the leadership, the better. Again, no, leadership implies the sort of imagine a pyramid system where you've got a handful of people controlling the rest. And no, that's not ideal because that's authoritarian. That's consolidating power for a handful of people. You want a society where everyone has the ability to influence things directly with their voice. Everyone has a vote. Workers as a collective are making decisions for the benefit of everyone, not just a handful of people deciding what's best. So yeah, this sort of argument gives way to dictatorships and authoritarian control. So absolutely, this is wrong. Democracy is more than a decision-making process. Huh. Interesting. Democracy is more than a decision-making process. Yeah, absolutely. Actually, no, yeah, because you can imagine people, states today let people vote, but they vote on who they want to cast votes. They vote on who they want to make decisions. And subsequently, you see people in government passing laws that most people don't want, like, for instance, the criminalization of certain drugs. And people want change, but people don't get change because the people they're voting into office, the politicians, do not care. They want to act in the interest of capital. They want to make money for corporations. They want to protect their status at the summit of society, and subsequently, do not act in the way that the people in society wish. That's not democracy, despite the fact that they had the election. So yeah, democracy is more than just decision making. I think I've read the question correctly. I'm hoping I'm not making myself look a fool. But yeah, no, this is definitely strongly agreed, because you need that direct worker control. Under a fair, worker-owned socialist society, you could see this where, workers could vote directly and discuss what was going on in the relevant sectors of their lives. So suddenly, farmers can say, oh, well, this is best to use for this thing. Here's the evidence for that. Here's why I think this method would be better. Here's why this would be better for the environment and stuff. And we can have a democratic outlook on things, instead of just, oh, well, I think this and my corporation will make more money, therefore we're doing this, and my party will vote in line with me, even though none of the people who voted for me wanted this. So yeah, strongly agree. Environmental regulations are essential. Yeah, pretty self-explanatory, isn't it? If you're not gonna look at what you're doing to the world around you, then you're gonna let your world crumble and deteriorate. Similarly, capitalism, this is another way that it fails to be a good system, because you see quite regularly the world around us, the oceans, the forests, the air, just disregarded to make more money. You see corporations treating the world as a dump, simply to protect their own profits and make more and more, despite the world dying around them. It's why our globe is in such a perilous state regarding the environment, and people do not care. Thank you, Carl Ulner, for subscribing, by the way. Yeah, no, so this is quite an obvious one, but also one that should make us think about how capitalism relies on environmental devastation. Because ultimately, if we start putting the environment first, we say to corporations, no, you are not free to ruin our planet in the name of capital, which all of a sudden goes against the core tenets of capitalism, because suddenly their ability to freely commodify and freely extract capital, extract profits even, is gone. Which is why we see right-wing politicians so frequently scrap so many of these regulations, like Trump, for instance, quite recently gutting an Obama era gutting oil protections, preventing accountability to be held for oil companies, spilling their oil. So yeah, strongly agree. A better world will come from automation, science, and technology. Definitely. This is quite an easy one. If we're going to have a world where people no longer have to give their physical labor in such excessive amounts or at all to, make society function, suddenly we have a lot of free time. We have abilities to just enjoy our time freely, not even having to have a job, because we can have robots doing it. We can use machines to the benefit of everyone, improve upon what we already have, and progress even further, to the point where we look back on today and think, oh, what an archaic time. We only had this, and we have this, we have, we had X back then, we have Y now. And it combines again with socialist ideas, the idea that all these things are human rights. It's an obviously correct idea, but one that is quite easily achievable if we actually set about, using the technology we have, which is already pretty good, and bettering it with the benefit of everyone in mind. Imagine if, instead of thinking, oh, I've not got a job, I can't provide for myself, thinking, yes, I don't have a job, I don't have to go to work anymore, and my life has got a lot more time all of a sudden. The fact that we are ruining and worrying about robots taking our jobs shows you how poor a system capitalism is, where technology is actively an enemy of the worker, when it should be a relief. And furthermore, under a system without abolition of capitalism, you're going to see automation, be used, not automation, sorry, science used in a way that does not benefit society. So science used to make a profit rather than to fix global issues. You're going to see science withheld and technology withheld to maintain profits, like, for instance, industries that are reliant on a lack of change, and subsequently need to curtail the improvement of certain industries. So, for instance, the use of fossil fuels, which obviously are non-renewable, but whilst people have control of them, make a lot of money. So yeah, I strongly agree. You need to be moving forward in any aspect you can, and that does not just come systemically, but in the relevant fields as well, like science. Children should be educated in religious or traditional values. No, quite simply, you don't need that hierarchical order. You don't need it at all. You don't need the old values are unsubstantiated simply because this is the way it was, this is how our religion teaches it, this is what this authority said. That's not something you want, especially when so many of these religions and traditions are lined in bigotry and discrimination. Go back to the traditional values of the UK. What women should be at the home doing, looking after the kids and not really doing anything with their lives but being in servitude to their husband. Black people were inferior to white people, don't have the same rights or status. There's no queer people, there's no LGBTQ people because they're degenerate, they're not existing. Disabled people are like locked away in asylums and not understood whatsoever, just essentially treated as though they're less than human. All these ideas are laced in our traditions and are often preached by conservative religious people, are things that we should be scrapping. We should be looking back and thinking, gosh, how far behind were we back in the day? What was going through humanity's minds when we thought this thing? Not thinking, let's keep this up because it's tradition. No, who cares about tradition if it's not good? So no, something should be evaluated for its merit. So like a traditional thing that's like, we'll go for a run because that can be healthy. That's something which should be kept because it's good, independent of any sort of heritage. It's just a good idea. Something like the bigotry that I mentioned a second ago, that I don't care if it's a part of culture. It's bad, so it should go. So yeah, strongly disagree. Traditions are of no value of their own. What a coincidence, eh? Just mentioned that. Yeah, pretty simple. Things have merit on their own standings. You can't just say, this is a part of X, therefore we should do it. That's not justified. Religion should play a role in government. Yeah, no. Society needs to be secular. There's nothing wrong with people being religious if they want to, but it has to be independent completely from society. And that should be pretty basic. We fought to keep religion out of it because ultimately it only serves as a tool to further capital. Look at what the evangelical and conservative religious groups in America have done to so many different sectors of society. Look at what they did to LGBTQ people. Look at what they did during the AIDS crisis. Look at what they've done to the education system. Allowing people this role, this essentially power based on an unjust authority, gives them the power to protect their capital, to make themselves extremely wealthy and powerful off the base of nothing substantive. So yeah, strongly disagree. Churches should be taxed the same way other institutions are taxed. Well, the institutions do not exist in the first place because it's an unjust power structure once again. But yeah, if they exist, you've got to be distributing the wealth much more fairly. Strongly agree. Climate change is currently one of the greatest threats to our way of life. Yep, pretty simple. Already mentioned it. Rising sea levels, rising temperatures. Destruction of resources, the decreasing quality of air. Pretty massive issues facing our planet, and capitalism is ultimately making this an even worse issue than it already is because it's instead of actively trying to fight it, we're in many cases thinking about capital more. We're trying to make profits instead of trying to fix our planet. And when I say we, I mean the ruling wealthy capitalist class, because obviously it's not like it's an individual doing it. It's not like it's all of us workers doing it. It's the people at the summit of society. So yeah, strongly agree. It is important that we work as a united world to combat climate change. Again, absolutely. It's not as though if one country decided to like scrap its regulations, it's just going to affect one country. You know, it's a global thing. And similarly, one country doing lots to make itself renewable and self-sufficient is not going to matter if it's not a global effort. You know, you're still going to have the rising temperature around the world. You know, it's pointless trying to do it by itself. It's why isolationism is such a poor idea. So yeah, we need to be removing this idea that this nation should just do it, or this nation should do more or less, and instead thinking we need to move beyond the competition between states and coming together as a collective of workers trying to fix our planet, as I've said quite a few times in this stream. So yeah, I strongly agree. Society was better many years ago than it is now. Again, this is a very similar question to the tradition question. No, just not the case. What, slavery, homophobia, no voting rights, worse medical practices. Imagine living to an age beyond like 50. It's not the case. So no, I completely disagree. It is important we maintain the traditions of the past. Again, this is the same question already answered. Strongly disagree. It is important that we think in the long term beyond our lifespans. Yeah, absolutely. Sort of the inverse of the tradition argument. We got to be thinking not just about what happens to us now, but what happens in the future. If we, for instance, people who are happy to turn up the world now to extract resources and make money, don't care about what happens to the planet in decades time or in centuries time, when there's going to be severe consequences for the unfettered pursuit of capital. Another reason as to why capitalism is such a terrible system, because there's no responsibility attached to the people pursuing capital. They're just able to do it and then disregard what happens because you were free to accrue their capital. The people who made fortunes off the Iraq War do not care about the long-term legacy that their actions have had in that region, where entire ways of life have been uprooted, where livelihoods have been destroyed, families lost to war. It's horrific when you think about it. So yeah, completely agree. Reason is more important than maintaining our culture. Yeah, if a culture is unjust, is not reasonable, it's not good, then what's the point of keeping it up? What's the point of, like, if I had a tradition of like smearing toothpaste all over myself or something, like, and I told my son to do it, it's like, I'm not going to be like, oh, you must do this, it's part of our culture, and expect to be taken seriously. Like, no, I'm not going to expect someone to do something simply because I've decided it's the societal thing we do. There has to be a reason behind it. It's why tradition has to be. It's not, you can't just say something is tradition and expect it to fly. It's got to have substantive reason behind it. So yeah, strongly agree. Drug use should be legalized or decriminalized. Absolutely. Already mentioned this, but yeah, there's no reason to bar people from that. From doing things as a consenting adult. It's silly to bar people from doing that. So yeah, I agree. Same-sex marriage should be legal. Yeah, again, the fact we even have to ask, it shouldn't. I don't like this sort of question because it's like people's human rights shouldn't be put up to a question. It should just be something guaranteed. Like, it shouldn't matter whether I personally think it should be legal. It should just be a guaranteed thing anyway. And the fact that we even need to ask that, again, shows where our society is. Yeah, I strongly agree. No cultures are superior to others. Again, strongly agree. I mean, actually, it's misleading, because I would say that if you look at like Nazi culture, that's not superior, that's not good. But then I get that the question is obviously referring to like, it's trying to play along the more different ethnicities and stuff. So like, is the culture of sub-Saharan African countries worse than of Western countries. And obviously, there's no superiority or inferiority there. Different cultures have different elements to it, and it's silly to sort of rank it all against each other as though it's a competition. So, yeah, I think strongly agree. Sex outside marriage is immoral. Again, it's more just, religious, traditionalist questions. A fairly obvious one, marriage, what is that? It's just what the state recognizes your union. Like, no, it's silly to just sort of say an argument like that. And obviously sex is, something for consenting adults. People should be free to do what they want with it, obviously all consensually, but if you accept migrants at all, it is important they assimilate into our culture. I mean, firstly, the idea that you can deny someone freedom of movement is a pretty backwards one in itself. But, secondly, what is culture? What is culture but a mix and match of different ideas and beliefs and people? A culture that excludes people for being different is a bit silly, really, when you consider that the difference will be little more than, oh, you're from a different land, you look a bit different. And it's hard, like, people, when I hear people defend this sort of thing, they usually bring up ideas of like TV and film, or it'd be like, oh, well, if you had a culture of like liking sport, you wouldn't just want someone coming in and changing everything. And it's completely different, because when you look at that, that's like a subset. That has nothing to do with a person. That has to do with an interest. You're not like going to see someone say, "Oh, football should be changed to kick sport, and you should be able to have guns and stuff." Like, no one's no one's like being absurd with it. But someone from a different land is literally the same as someone else, and they don't have any difference really beyond the artificial one of coming from a different state, which obviously we don't recognize the state as a legitimate concept, a just concept, I should say. So no, I don't agree with this. Obviously, like, you don't want people who are actively trying to enforce bigotry and stuff, but that isn't, that also isn't specified. Migrants are just people from another land, and it's silly to say otherwise. It's silly to say that there's some sort of threat to the culture. My family are descend from migrants. In fact, my grandma is from Jamaica. It's silly to sort of imply that she would have had to, assimilate, or, oh, you could have been a threat, but luckily you assimilated. Like, no, she was as valid a part of the culture as anyone else. It's silly to divide ourselves like that anyhow. So yeah, strongly disagree. Abortion should be prohibited in most or all cases. Again, a nice easy one. Strongly disagree. Abortion is a human right, with rights of anyone who can get pregnant. And I could not care less about what some conservative scumbag thinks about that. Who cares about what you personally have in your mind about life? You can't assign your ideas of life onto a living human being to determine whether they can have control of their body. So yeah, this argument is just, it's horrible the more you think about it. Imagine if someone said to you, you will not have this vaccination because I've decided that the cells inside your body are living things, and if that polio that is inside you is deserves life. It's like you'd be furious if someone denied you a vaccination based on that. I see it as a very similar thing. Gun ownership should be prohibited for those without a valid reason. I disagree with this. Obviously, I feel as though gun control is quite a complex issue, because obviously you don't want the situation where, like you see in America, where people shoot up schools, and there's so many shootings, an absurd number. However, it is not so much guns directly being a problem as the sort of culture in America as such, and in many places in general, just of a lack of acknowledgement of feelings, and the subsequent anger that comes from that, and the frustration being poured into violence, the toxic masculinity that turns young men into these people who don't have any access to expressing their emotions and feel the only way they can vent their frustrations, their anger at things that they shouldn't be angry about and are often not their fault, but then, end up turning into their fault through toxic masculinity, um, turns into a disaster where they end up shooting up their school. There's more to it than just, oh, it's begun. um, so no, I don't think that should be prohibited. And whilst it is complex, I think when you look at what gun control has ultimately done, it has been used to disarm marginalized people, like black people, for instance, by administrations fearing the demand for change from workers. So yeah, I disagree. I support single-player universal healthcare. Yeah, healthcare is a human right. It should be universal and accessible to all. We have the resources to, fund it and maintain it. So yeah, easy. Nearly at the end. Prostitution should be illegal. No, sex workers, they're workers who have, control of their own body, doing what they want with it. That should be fine. You shouldn't be curtailing people's right to do as they please based on your own moral standards. So yeah, easy one. Disagree. Maintaining values is essential. No. What's family? It's not like there's a set thing for family or values, and it's silly to again adhere to some sort of tradition just because it's the way things are done. Easy one. I'm going to whiz through these last few ones because I'm getting a little bit hoarse, I'm afraid. Straight progress at all costs is dangerous. No, because if it's progress, it's it's good. It's progression. It's moving forward. Like it wouldn't be progress if it wasn't moving forward. So, for instance, if you've got this new idea about how to have a more sustainable society, but it involves letting millions of people starve, that's not progress. Like, I think this question is trying to sort of say, oh, well, you got to put, is it worth sacrificing a few lives or a few rights to improve? And obviously, I can see where that's coming from, but I wouldn't consider that progress as such. So, yeah, I disagree. Genetic modification is a force for good, even on humans. No, you can't be like, you can't look at someone's genes and say, oh, we're going to get rid of like disabilities and stuff. We're going to change people's bodies because you're wrong. It's like it's quite easy to see how it just leads into eugenics and stuff. So no, that's not a force for good at all. And to test it on animals too. Living creatures being used to just test subjects, experiments. That's just not humane, is it? That's not something that's good. Imagine if like an alien race came and took you off the planet and said, "Oh well, we're going to cure lots of diseases back home, but you're going to lose a few arms." It's like, no, that's not good. Imagine how you would feel if someone did that to you. No, it's not something you need. We should open our borders to immigration. I feel like that should say immigrants, because you wouldn't. Never mind. But yeah, freedom of movement is a right. Feels like freedom of movement is a right. People should be able to move where they like. And yeah, what is a border but an artificial line in the ground? Why? Whose decision is it to say no? You cannot come here. It's not your land, not your right to own a piece of land and say no, you can't come here. It's hardly as though everyone's going to show up at your particular house. The world is a vast place, and to deny people space when there clearly is space is silly, especially when you consider that people move to places because of the welfare. People would probably be less inclined to travel across countries if wealth was fairly distributed, if there wasn't such wealth hoarded in the West. So yeah, I strongly agree. Governments should be as concerned about foreign citizens as they are about those within their borders. That's an interesting one. Government should be as concerned about foreign citizens as they are about those within their borders. Uh, well, I mean, I suppose I'm neutral to that, to be honest. I don't really. The validity of the government isn't exactly great. Uh, I'm not, like I've already said, I don't agree with states even existing. However, obviously you want to be. I mean, I think I'm gonna have to um, disagree with that. Um, Actually, no, agree. It's. I think agree. I'm a little bit confused with this. I'm tired, so maybe I'm stumbling over these last few ones. But no, we shouldn't be considering foreign or national. It's just, is this person doing something wrong? Yes, let's do something about it. No, let them do what they like. Are they harming anyone else? Yes, then let's stop them. No, then let's not. And it's not a government that should be doing that, but it should be, workers being able to be autonomous and not having someone deciding what's right and wrong for them. You know, to agree. All people, regardless of factors like culture or sexuality, should be treated equally. Yeah, quite simple. Everyone's got human rights. Everyone's an autonomous human being. Everyone should be treated the same. It is important that we further my group's goals above all others. Nice, easy one to end. No. What is my group? What's a group in society? Like, this could be like, oh, who likes the show The Wire above all else? Like, is that a group? Is it my race? Is it my ethnicity? Is it all that sort of stuff? It's rubbish to sort of say stuff about. Anyway, we're done. We got our results. Economic axis, socialist. This wasn't a surprise, really, was it? 89% equality, 11% markets. I don't know where we get these numbers from, but it's quite clearly in the red, aren't I? Diplomatic axis, cosmopolitan, 8.5% nation, 91.5% world. Again, it's not surprising. I don't see the point in having individual nations really for anything but like trivial sport events, maybe, and the odd, oh, I'm from this nation. But in terms of states, like, you don't need it. You don't need a just society does not need that. Civil axis, anarchist, not surprising. Liberty does not need authority. You don't need a group of people telling you what to do. People have no need to follow your social order. So our society should reflect that. No surprise. Societal axis, revolutionary. Absolutely. We got to move forward. What's the point of adhering to old standards when we could do better? Closest match, libertarian socialism. Yeah, I mean, I see socialism as pretty similar to that in a sense. Certainly in terms of liberty, I prefer just the label of socialist, but um, it's hardly bad, is it? So yeah, um, yeah, that's the survey. A bit underwhelming in truth. I mean, some of the questions were a little bit repetitive. Um, I thought that I didn't perhaps explain all the answers perfectly because I was like mumbling a little bit at times, and I'm a little bit tired. Um, but yeah, I think um, it was perhaps not as entertaining as it could have been, perhaps. um, I it wasn't as engaging as I would have enjoyed, and I'm sorry if it wasn't brilliant. Um, but that was what it was. 2 hours I've been doing this for. I hope you all enjoyed it, and hopefully should have some somewhat more engaging stuff coming up. We've got a few debates, hopefully. Um, one of which is involving the excellent, well, not excellent, but as engaging War Corps 666. So you can look forward to that in the coming few days, hopefully. But anyway, thank you everyone to listening in. It's been uh, a challenge getting through this, to be honest. Speaking non-stop, essentially to myself for like nearly 2 hours, or an hour and a half. Um, it's not easy. But anyway, thanks everyone for listening, and I'll see you all next time.